It should have just stayed with the, we want players that are here. I'm coaching the players that are here. That old line we hear from coaches is the one that's the safest and keeps them out of trouble. Because to sit there and say he had a contract, he didn't want to be here, under that logic, had Jon Gruden been the coach of the Los Angeles Rams, Aaron Donald would have been traded.
Correct.
Had he been the coach of New York Giants last year, Odell Beckham would have been traded.
Correct.
Because they were under contract and they held out.
And they would have traded Le'Veon Bell.
I just wonder in all of Jon Gruden's head coaching career if they ever had a holdout when he was coaching that ended up getting paid. Because it makes it sound like if you got under contract and you hold out, you're not part of this team. You don't want to be part of this team. So I didn't understand that at all. I think it was a major mistake that they traded him away. And I think Jon Gruden's logic there was a little twisted.
Oh, there you go. No, go ahead and do it.
He missed it. Cliff missed it. So
okay, all right, perfect. Yeah. I got away with one there.
Cliff is still missing it.
Yeah,
he's talking to Stanzik doing something
But
else.
So I guess I look at this and I say the old demonize the player routine probably would have played back in John's last coaching stint, because at that point I think people would have been much more likely to buy into that. Now I think we know a little bit too much, and we've seen a little bit too much of this, and especially with the amount of dollars on the line right now, people are usually understanding that this is the only tool. And even now we recognize holdouts don't always work. We got in a situation this year, Odell Beckham Jr. wasn't even a holdout. He had to go into camp to show them that.
We saw both sides. Aaron Donald held out, got paid.
Yeah.
Odell went in and got paid.
Exactly. Look, so every situation is different, but that's the only recourse you have. And you're right. The history of the NFL is littered with cases of guys who held out and still ended up back with that team. It's an amazing process.
And here's the other part that sort of undermines what John was saying there. How do they know? They didn't have any conversations with him. From everything that we've been told, from Adam Schefter and everybody else, they had not spoken about details of a contract with Khalil Mack since February. So how do you know he didn't want to be there?
I also wonder if when John went there, or if they cut any players who were still under contract, if that player walked into John and said, wait a minute, I still have a deal.
I have a contract.
You're not honoring my contract. You cut me. I mean, there's two sides to this. So I don't know why he went down that road. One interesting fact that I came out of this as well, that come out that, did you see the Rams were trying to trade for Khalil Mack?
Yeah, offered a first and a third.
A first and a third, and then they were gonna give him a raise this year, and then they said they were gonna be all in it for this year, and then they were gonna trade him at the end of the year. They said they wanted again. They would have Ndamukong Suh, Aaron Donald, Michael Brockers,
Dominic Easley,
and Khalil Mack. So they were going to trade a first and a third, have him for 1 year, trade him, and try and get that back again. Boy, that's pretty wild. That'd have been something.
We haven't even talked about the Rams in this situation. We'll get into that going forward. But this is now, after one game, it's close to being critical mass for the Raiders.
And they were leading at halftime of this game.
They got leading. Smoked 23-0.
Second half,
in the second half. Derek Carr, losing quarterbacks. Here's how to win games. Don't have 3 or 4 interceptions.
Losing quarterbacks were no touchdowns, and he had one.
We had one touchdown.
And did Stafford, I believe. But 7 interceptions between the two of them, Stafford and Carr.
We always say let's not judge a team in September, especially a Bill Belichick team. They went out, remember they got rid of Lawyer Malloy that year, and then they lost 31-0. They went on to win the Super Bowl that year. That was Bill Belichick with a really loaded, talented roster in New England. I'm very curious to see what happens going forward with the Raiders because, listen, if it goes off to an early start, Mike, you know this. People are going to say, wait a minute, we could have used that guy, and we're not. They got no pressure last night. And
they didn't use wide. Amari Cooper had 1 catch last night.
Yeah.
Like Jared Cook set every tight end record in the world, but you see the strategy involved here. Jon Gruden has very clearly said, all right, we have a spread nickel league. I'm going to try and go right up the middle, and it worked for a little bit, but then eventually stuff gives way.
And that's another thing we can question John on because they couldn't get rid of Michael Crabtree fast enough to sign Jordy Nelson. Michael Crabtree, whether we want to admit it or not, the last few years, Michael Crabtree had really been the number 1 receiver for the Raiders, and Amari Cooper was the number 2 receiver.
Their 2 leading receivers, Jared Cook and Jalen Richard, had 9 catches each. It's a tight end and a running back.
Yeah. A lot of questions about how that team is built going forward in Oakland, and they'll have time to answer them.